Introducing The Water Hour, the show that dives deep into the critical role of water in shaping the South African economy and society. Welcome and join us as we delve into the untold stories, insights and solutions offered by South Africa's most foremost water professionals. From the murky depths of failing infrastructure to the glimmers of hope in innovative strategies, this conversation promises to be a riveting encounter with the stark realities as well as the promising possibilities shaping our most vital resource, water. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome to The Water Hour, the show that dives deep into the critical role of water in shaping our society and economy. Don't miss out on our insights and updates on water-related issues. Join us as we explore the work of the South African Water Chamber, only on The Water Hour. If you're just joining us, then welcome to The Water Hour. If you're not yet following us, please do so on our social media channels. I'm your host, Bridget Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and today I'm going to be joined from the South African Water Chamber, Professor Anthony Turton, and also Benoit Leroy. Do remember that we are monitoring the comments, so feel free to post comments, ask questions in the chat. And so a very warm welcome to Benoit and also Anthony Turton.
Good afternoon to you and the listeners.
Yeah, hi everybody. Good to be back online.
Good afternoon to you and all the listeners.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for joining us so much. So to kick off the conversation for today, could I possibly ask both of you to start off with an overview of your perspective of 2023 in terms of the South African landscape? And Anthony, if I can start with you.
Yes, in a very simple summary, I would say that in 2023, we've seen the realization that the state is collapsing, particularly in the water sector. This has now come home. The chickens have come home to roost without any question of doubt on the one hand. And on the other hand, we're seeing the state trying to reassert its authority from the center, starting to charge criminally certain municipal managers and what have you in a kind of last-ditch attempt to regain control. But it's very, very clear that control has been lost. So we're now in a situation where, for the first time, I'm seeing companies starting to wake up and smell the roses as the new policy of water shifting has now become official, and they're going to start seeing the impact of that going through the economy in 2024. So that's my summary for the year.
Thanks very much. And Benoit, can we ask you for a brief summary of the year?
Sure. So, from my perspective, in 2002, which was also an important year in Tony's year, was when we decided to close the water business in South Africa, because we said this would happen. We said we'd run out of water, we wouldn't be able to treat sewage and all the like. So, just past 2 decades, unfortunately, our business decision was correct at the time. And but for me, it's been the first year in my 40 years plus in the water industry where I've seen so many metros run out of water. As we speak now, Joburg is out of water again. It's always out of water, but so is Tshwane. Also, it's the second time only that people have died of cholera, more than 10, 20 people, and we talk about them just like that. So cholera is back. It's an old disease we wiped out 50, 100 years ago. I was also privy to some business forums I was invited to as a keynote, and what was very encouraging, well, the one side was business in general had no idea about water insecurity. They'd heard about it, and I'm talking captains on the JC, And so we had some enlightening discussions, which was good because we sensitized them. And what came out is in the food and beverage, for example, a lot had moved off grid without making too much noise. One made a bit of noise through the court process and has got full cooperation now with its 4 big plants in 4 different provinces. So the water intensive industry has already moved off. In Nelson Mandela Bay, because of the drought since 2015, most big industry had moved off the grid, never to come back. Okay, that's the bad side of the coin, because municipalities are now losing energy and electricity, revenue. I thought what was really good is that South Africa is still on the map for good reasons. Our colleague Hamad Kassan has been elected as president of the APEX organization, the International Water Association. So we've still got a few skills left in this country that understand how things used to work. Because when we rebuild, we've got to understand how we used to make them work, bridge it with new technology and get it going. But 7 of our 8 metros are really decrepit. Cape Town has got its own issues, but they are nothing compared to the rest of the metros. So all 3 in Gauteng are gone. Are gone from a water perspective, and it's not energy induced. They're just running in parallel. But I think there's a knock-on effect. We're going to see the whole automotive industry is now leaving the country. Mittal is leaving the country, and so there's no steel available to build cars anyway. So half the automotive guys have said they're leaving because mostly water issues and energy issues on top of each other. They just can't take both. Never mind, they can't get the goods down to the ports for export, and they can't get them out of the ports. So I think we've come home to, as Tony says, the chickens have come home to roost, and it's not a nice roosting place. It's really unbearable. People are on edge. And I've got family and friends in Joburg, for example, and in Tikweni, and they've a week at a time of no water. And how do you sanitize yourself? How do you cook? And I'm not talking about drinking water. That's an easy thing to sort out. It's all the the other things. So I think maybe because South Africans, people say they're resilient, they're apathetic. They generally speaking just take it, lap it. Read the bad news in the newspaper and things will come right. My neighbors say no, it'll come right, but they've all sunk boreholes. Now they're all running out of water because it's not a deep water table. And I said, please don't drink it if you do anything. And they have to go down 200 meters. There's a small amount of panic, setting in. But I think big business is ahead of the game. They're putting a lot of pressure onto government through on a few groups linked up to the various ministries and the presidency. And there's huge pressure, and it's getting nasty. It's really getting nasty, and I think that pressure is going to force things to change. And I think we're going to see the water industry really. There's some big projects, coming through. The big thing is how they're going to be funded. And the only one's got money is business. And it's actually got more money than I thought it had because we've spent nothing this year. Nobody has gone into any big projects. So there's a lot of money to do it. It's just the T's and C's have to be our T's and C's and not government's T's and C's. And that's where we're going to have the loggerheads next year. And I think next year is going to be quite interesting in how we find compromise. And the compromise will be in industry's favor, heavily in industry's favor. And depending what happens in the elections, I think it will be heavily not in favor of the current guys. So what will happen is the water is top of mind. Water and energy are top of mind. And, Harvard and the studies that came out that were commissioned by the South African government all say, the same thing. So I think we're on the right path. I must say, from a media perspective, I've never seen so much media attention on water in my entire life put together as we've had this year. So it is getting attention. It is an issue. And I think the message is coming through.
Awesome. Thanks very much for that summary, Benoit. I'm going to kick off with my first 2 questions for you, Anthony. The next 2 questions will be for you, Benoit. So my first question is, as water professionals, how do you assess the microbiological safety of drinking water in South Africa based on the recent reports that have come out?
Okay, my first up. Okay, so the facts are our friends. What the blue and green drop reports tell us we need to accept at face value, even though they do not record the actual breakdowns. They just refer to chemical and biological parameters, but and they also come from municipalities, so their own reporting system. So if we take that at face value, the fact that we've got elevated levels of microbiological contamination is entirely consistent with the fact that we've got a very, very high level of dysfunction in our sewage works. This is what we've been predicting on this channel for a period of time now. The fact that more than 90% of the sewage works are dysfunctional in some way or other. And up until now, I've been talking about 5 billion liters of water every day that we return as sewage return flows. I see that number's recently been revised to over 7 billion liters of sewage that's returned into our rivers and dams every single day. So that's entirely consistent. Our bulk water treatment plants were never, ever designed to take sewage contaminated water and make them safe. So the red flag is, if the big bulk producers like Rand Water, which are amongst the biggest in the world, if they cannot cope, then what about the small little towns in rural Free State and the Northern Cape? What about them? They've all got the same problem. So yeah, that's why we've got a high level of contamination, microbiological contamination, and it's we without sounding alarmist, the next logical rung on that ladder will now be the onset of some kind of pathology, some kind of outbreak, some kind of epidemic, some kind of human health impact. We've seen it raise its head now with cholera. So there's something along those lines.
And Anthony, what are some of the factors, in your opinion, that contribute to the decline in microbiological water quality in the different regions? Are they the same reasons? Are they different reasons?
Okay, well, the simple reality is that South Africa, the South African water reticulation system is designed on an engineering philosophy called indirect reuse. So in other words, all of our wastewater is returned into a river because people don't want to drink sewage that's been reclaimed. So it goes back into a river, and it then goes from there into the potable drinking work. So it's reused indirectly. Now, that's an illusion. That's kind of an optical illusion, because that means that the water coming out of the sewage works can't be 90% compliant. It has to be 100% compliant. Because if it's not 100% compliant, then you are contaminating your drinking water at source. So that is why your water compliance on your green drop report has to be of such a high standard. You can't say 50% is a pass rate. You can't say that. That means that 50% has failed, and that means that of the 7 billion liters a day of sewage going into the country, at least half of that is untreated. So this is a serious problem. You must appreciate that returning sewage is also laden with pathogens, but it's also, there's another thing in returning sewage, and that is endocrine disrupting chemicals. So these are your gender-specific chemicals, androgens and estrogens that have an impact on the gender bearing of society. So these are very, very important consequences about the reduction in water quality. So the microbiological element that is being reported is actually an indicator. That's the tip of the iceberg, if you like. It's telling us that there's a very, very big iceberg beneath the water.
Thanks very much for that. And Benoit, if we can switch to you now, in your opinion, what challenges do water supply systems face in maintaining their infrastructure as reflected in the reports?
So generally speaking, apart from the low quality intake into our potable water plants because of what Tony said of semi-treated or untreated sewage, is we have not spent anywhere near what we should have. We have an Auditor General is picking up on it now, and you're supposed to spend something like 8%. He's saying now, she's saying that you have to spend 15% to catch up. You will never catch up at 15%. So like the roads, the ports, the railroad, we've sweat the assets, and we've milked the fiscus and the system, and we've employed people to vote for us. That's the crude, the crude reality. The city of Cape Town spends far more in capex on water than the 3 metros in Joburg that count for 15 million people, and Cape Town's 4.8. Just to give you an idea. Cape Town is playing a catch-up because with that previous farce of a mayor they had 2 or 3 mayors ago, the one who had the barges for diesel that didn't exist in the world, she delayed projects for over half a decade. So there's a little bit of catch-up in there. But the biggest thing is there was a roadshow that I was invited to recently by the mayor's office about the reuse. They invited the mayors of, I think it was Melbourne, Perth, LA, and one of the towns in Spain and Brazil. And so Cape Town's going on a big reuse, etc. So Cape Town is starting to reprioritize. There's not enough money to go around. That's the reality. So Cape Town, without water or energy, and it's embarking on taking itself completely off the Eskom grid, one thing, and then water, it will offer 99.9% assurity of supply, according to SANS 241, plus some additional specs they're using from best practice, because the emerging contaminants, we don't necessarily measure them in SANS 241. And when you start doing reuse, you need to add those in because you're closing the loop, a lot tighter. So we have to reprioritize spending in a shrinking pile. So I see the losers will be the poor. So we're going to find more and more, because we've got 2 things we've got to do in this country. We've got to rebuild infrastructure as there's no country, and the other one, you've got to pay the debt. And you can't do the one, not the other. So what's going to happen is the rich will make a plan, and there's various classes of rich, from middle class and up. And those below the middle class are going to suffer like they do in a lot of Africa. 200 million go to bed hungry in sub-Saharan Africa every night. That number is just going to grow in South Africa until we can sort it out. So I think we have to, the fiscus pool is too small and shrinking in real terms, in dollar terms, per capita, and we have to reprioritize basic services like water and energy. So the Harvard report says energy is the biggest thing, but the slow killer, the slow onset disaster is water. So water took 20 years to keel over. Electricity took 10 years to keel over. And that's sort of my view on it. It's a money issue, and politicians hold the purse strings.
So from your perspective, and in terms of water management, what can be done to address the critical state of water performance in the water supply systems? Can anything be done?
Yeah, so I'm a great believer in the 5th industrial revolution. I know a lot of ministers talking going from the 3rd to the 4th. I've tried to explain to quite a few of them that we're actually in the 5th. We go from 4th to 5th. So that will sink in, I think, very quickly. And so we've got technology. So we need to have, like the Eskom app that we've got, we need to have it for water. We can measure online all of the microbiological indicators. We can measure them online live. And we're going to have to do that to get faith back into the consumer, A, and B, to help the Water Service Authority engaging its improvements, because it has to improve. It can't carry on deteriorating. And you have to do that live. It's no use taking a sample like we see this fiasco in the eThekwini beaches. It depends on which way the wind blows, the rain, and this and that, and the currents, and the samples take 3 days to incubate and to get results out for the microbiological. You need to have it online. And that technology exists. It's being used in North America, in Canada, and the USA quite successfully now for 2 years. And it is available in South Africa. So the quick fix is to digitize all of these things so that you don't go to the laboratory for live monitoring. We do live monitoring of total dissolved solids or conductivity, pH, COD and things, but we need to do the microbiological apart from the pH and the temperature. And by doing that, we're able to get a sense of the health of the distribution network. That's the first thing. And then we're going to have to start patching things up. And, because every time there's a leak in the system, you compromise it. It means you have to repair it, flush it, and the flushing can be well or not well done. You waste a lot of water. So online measuring is going to be the only way we're going to know whether we have water of the right quality to keep the population healthy. Unfortunately, the metros will be the only ones in a position to do that initially. But that also counts for roughly half the population. Doesn't mean the other half aren't important. That's just the reality. The small lost municipalities are called lost municipalities, for a reason. But there's a lot of big business that's trying to keep their retail stores going, who are investing and adopting, a town, a village, and things like that. So we're seeing that type of stuff happen. So it's not a technology issue, but we're going to be forced to use the digital toolbox, and we're going to have to do that because with that, there's a whole lot of other add-ons which will help us instill better governance frameworks, and not, but they can do it live. It's just not being forced to because the policy doesn't do that. So that's where we're going to work on next year, is to get policy up to fifth industrial revolution. And what it does, it'll speed up and give us a helicopter view in better managing the disastrous situation we have, and then we can target where we have to intervene. So it's a very powerful, software is a very powerful tool if it's used properly, and it's easy to use. It's not as if it's difficult to use.
Definitely sounds like technology can be the answer to a lot of our water woes and challenges. Anthony, if I may switch to you at this point, from your professional viewpoint, how do we explain, or in layman's terms, how do we understand the disparities in drinking water performance between the different regions in South Africa? And what role does effective water management play in the performance of water supply systems?
Yes, okay. So you must appreciate that the blue and green drop reports are based on the way that the municipalities report to the regulator. So there's no verification that the way they report is accurate or true. So they might, in fact, be lying about these things. We don't know. There is no external verification. That's where Benoit's system comes in, because then you've got an independent online verification. And we see this becoming very important now, for example, in Durban, where there's an ongoing battle now. You get a company called Talbot and Talbot. They're putting out, as part of their public benefit initiative, they put out regular, accurate reporting about water quality on the rivers and beaches. And you find that the municipal numbers are going to differ wildly. So what this does is simply feeds into the narrative of mistrust. So I think that we're going to have to rebuild trust again next year. Part of it's going to be this whole data thing. But let's not forget, the question that you asked me now is about the disparity. Well, there's disparity. All municipalities aren't equal. Some are more bankrupt than others. All are bankrupt in some way, but some are more bankrupt than others. And some are all plagued by technical scarcity or a paucity of qualified management skills. And that's where it comes in. Because at the end of the day, it's a management crisis. And if you can't measure it, if you can't visualize it, if you can't forecast it and project it, and if you can't understand how one thing links to another, then you can't actually manage it. And that's our problem. We've got people that are woefully inadequate in positions of decision-making importance without any technical support. And of course, because they're politically connected, they are royal game and they are untouchable. This is why we are where we are today. And I cannot see South Africa coming out of the nosedive until that matter is dealt with. If we don't grasp the bull by the horns on that particular matter and depoliticize the decision making in water and place in positions of authority technically competent people that can be hired and fired based purely on performance, not on party allegiance. If we do that, then we're going to come out of this nosedive. And what's then going to happen, I think, is we're going to go into a kind of temporary boom period, because we're going to suddenly have to re-equip all of the systems with the latest technologies and whatever, and we're then going to rapidly jump forward into this fifth industrial revolution that Ben was talking about. So, the service providers that are hanging around in the wings, waiting for that collapse to happen so that they can be part of the recapitalization, I think they are going to benefit. But of course, we can't predict when the actual collapse will take place. But certainly it's going to take place.
Thanks very much, Prof. And Benoit, for you, the next question, I think you've got first-hand knowledge of. What are the primary causes for water supply disruptions, particularly in the major metropolitan area of Gauteng? And are there ways in which demand and supply can be balanced to optimize or prevent these severe disruptions?
So South Africa's biggest single consumer of water are water leaks, non-revenue water. And we've seen over 97, 98% is, apart from Joburg, is generally speaking physical leaks. Joburg is 25, 25. 25 physical and 25 is administrative. It's basically theft, bad metering, and poor credit control. So they could sort out, but that's the biggest consumer. So the inefficient leaking bucket syndrome is the biggest, outside the Western Cape, is the biggest consumer of urban water, which is 27, 28% of our water demand in this country. So now for Gauteng, for the three, we're talking the three metros, between 25 and 50 billion rand is required. That is unaffordable. And that should have been spent over the last 32, actually 40 years, because the spending stopped about 40 years ago. So the cause is the leaking bucket. And so what they're doing with water shifting is spreading the supply across all the reservoirs in Gauteng, so that they all run dry together. Not one runs dry, not another one. So it sounds like good old-fashioned Soviet communism, you know. But they have no choice, because you've got to try and keep the systems wet. What's happening? The systems are going dry irrespective. And by putting more pressure into the system, so they're pumping at maximum over their limits, the water use license limits. And what's happening is it leaks more, and you destroy more pipes. So the more pressure, more pipes, and it's not a linear thing. It's actually exponential. Once you start getting, we've seen 1 to 2 leaks in 6 months in a kilometer pipeline. The next 6 months, you're going to get 5 to 10 bursts. You have to replace them. So we don't have, and the private sector doesn't have 25 to 50 billion rand. That's just, the number is just too big. So this is a nuke bomb. The only way is a digital toolbox, because what you're then able to do is measure where your demand is going to be with the load shedding. And we've got a fancy set of algorithms in the digital world that are able to detect load shedding, so energy demand with water demand. And what you do is you try and run the system differently. So you have to try and run the system as full as possible, whereas we normally run them between 60, 65%. We need to run them at 90, 95%. Whether we can do that or not is a different story, because we haven't built enough reservoirs. So reservoirs are being built, but it's sort of in Gauteng, it's 1 per metro, per year, which is, it should be 10. So we don't have the storage capacity to fill up. So we're going to have to carry on building reservoirs, and it's not that easy to do, because people have built on servitudes where reservoirs were planned. Now you've got to move them. But then with smart analytics, we'll be better able to match supply and demand. And also we can predict with smart analytics where the likely bursts are going to happen, which is quite difficult. Seasoned professionals are quite good at it, but we don't have many around, and they're not cheap. So the smart analytics, so we can preemptively replace that kilometer that's going to burst all the time and waste water and the likes. But to do this, you can't have the cadres you got in there. You can't have this BE nonsense. You can have people who can do the job. So, it's all black cat situation. We don't care what color the cat is, as long as it catch the rats and mice. That's what we need. But we need a fast black cat and a clever one, because the rats and mice now are genetically modified. They're much smarter. The world is more stochastic. So we need the best resources. So we're going to have to, we don't have them all here. We've got some, we're going to have to import them at great cost to the economy. So we have to turf cadre deployment out, because cadres don't come from outside. They come from inside. So, we have to, as Tony said, and I'm a great believer, once we start depoliticizing our basic services like water, electricity, we'll start turning the ship around. But we have to do that so we can get the best resources in there and train the next generation, because we don't have a next generation. You're mute, Brigitte.
Thanks very much. Anthony, switching over to you, very much tying in with what Benoit just said. In your opinion, what role does financial accountability play in the success of water and sanitation, and how could funding for water and sanitation be better prioritized?
Okay, I don't think that funding has ever been a problem. In fact, whenever I hear the word funding, I just see greedy little cadres trying to go dip their hands into the cookie jar. There's always going to be enough money for doing what we have to do. So it's not a shortage of money problem. It's about what we do with that money. That's the problem. How do we prioritize? How do we plan the correct solution? In fact, what I've been saying lately in my media engagements is that our problem in South Africa is that we've got inadequately diagnosed problems for which we have inappropriate solutions. So inadequate diagnosis on the one hand, inappropriate solutions on the other. And the logic behind that is that that's where your profits are maximized for your comrades. So if you are in the business of stealing money and misappropriating funds that are allocated for a certain thing, then all you do is you misdiagnose the problem and you then apply an inappropriate solution, because the two aren't going to match each other, and that's where the windfall is. That's where all the tons of money sloshes around and it just disappears. It's like the leaking bucket syndrome in the water sector. So we've got to focus on the priority areas. And now, where do we start doing that? Well, we don't have a technically competent set of institutions anymore, because the institutions have been gutted. So I'm honestly yet to see even a big institution like Johannesburg Water that has got technical competence at board level. Even if you look at the composition of the board there, I mean, there's no proper engineer. There are people claiming to be engineers, but they're actually technicians, and these are inappropriately qualified people that are simply unable to comprehend what it is that they have to do. So how can we allocate the money correctly? In fact, if you had to ask any of the members on the board, let's just say of Johannesburg Water, what their asset register looks like and what is the remaining useful life for all of the assets on that register, they would look at you with a blank stare. They simply wouldn't understand what it is. And that's really at the heart of this thing. You've got to have an asset register. You've got to know what the remaining useful life is of each asset. And then you've got to prioritize and budget and allocate capital and other assets or other resources to fixing those things up, to replace them on a planned and constructive way. So we've fallen so far behind that we've almost got a catastrophic situation confronting us, which then comes to what I said earlier on about the fact that in the post-collapse situation, the post-collapse rejuvenation, I think we're going to be able to jump forward there quite considerably, because we're going to have to replace almost everything. So we then hopefully are going to be wise at that point in time, and we're going to place almost everything with the best that's available. And not just fix what's broken, but actually go to the next generation. And that's where we'll start benefiting from the kind of technologies that Benoit keeps talking about, the digital toolbox and those, the Internet of Things, and all of those are the sort of smart AI technologies, etc. All of which are becoming mainstream now, and all of which have got huge benefits, but we can't, of course, supply them because our institutions have failed in South Africa, and we can't get past that technically incompetent decision-making barrier.
You muted again.
Thanks very much for that, Anthony. Benoit, I want to quickly switch to our favorite word in South Africa, and that is load shedding. How can our water infrastructure be better protected against the impact of extended periods of load shedding? And are there any measures that we can implement to prevent these intermittent water outages due to load shedding?
So first I want to shock you, Tony. The general manager of Joburg Water has got an asset register. It says 113 billion. It says 50% has less than 5 years life. And of that 50% is reticulation, and that's where the 25 billion number comes out. Secondly, he says he's going to outsource all of his water DMAs, district measurement areas, or DMZs or DMZs as the Americans call it. And those RFPs are busy being put together because the animal is just too big for them to address. The 25 billion rand spread over 5 years would have a massive impact, and the municipality can afford to borrow 5 billion on a savings bankability basis. So I don't want to complicate it, but it's quite a radical way of looking at it. In the middle of it is a digital toolbox with a governance framework that has zero pilfering ability, nothing, nada. And there's obviously a little bit of pushback, but I can tell you also that in Joburg, in Tshwane, in in 100 municipalities, but like in Cape Town, we can tell you exactly where the assets are. And in the DMZs, we can tell you what the non-revenue water was a quarter ago, 3 months ago. Obviously, with the digital toolbox, you can say this is what it is now as you look at it. So there's obviously a big gap in doing that. And the surveys that have been done is that utilities believe that they are only 40 to 60% digital ready, which is low confidence levels and all that. I believe it's probably 60 to 80%, because there really are some bright lights in quite a few of. It's not enough bright lights, but there are bright lights. Okay, and I'm personally dealing with them, and they're very impressive. But these people are way overloaded. How we overcome the load shedding is using the same digital toolbox. But what we found is we found an algorithm that was developed. So water systems are carbon intensive. And so the more water we pump into a leaking bucket, the more electricity we're using, so the more carbon footprint we have. And globally, the utilities have undertaken, and in COP28, they've put the numbers down. I don't follow it that closely. It'll come out in summary form, hopefully. But generally speaking, there's a big drive in reducing the carbon footprint. And the only way you can do that is to put in to the water distribution systems and the treatment systems and the wastewater treatment systems is to put in renewable energy. But now, how do you get renewable energy in at the right time and at the right price? So there's a few algorithms around who are able to do that. And the one we're looking at introducing into South Africa is part of reducing the non-revenue water, but can also address the carbon footprint we've got to track. And I'll tell you why we have to track it here, apart from the COP28, is the carbon. We have to match water supply with water demand. And these algorithms do about 40,000 calculations per second. Extremely powerful. And there's one particular country that's quite good at this. So renewables are driving other innovations into it. So to overcome load shedding, putting diesel gensets and the likes increases the carbon footprint, but the diesel gensets and the diesel get stolen. Okay, and remember, we produce very little of our fuels anymore in this country. It's all imported. So there's a limited amount of diesel available, and diesel is being phased out anyway. So it's not the answer. So what we've got to do is use smart analytics, where we can measure live and predict using AI what the demand's going to be, what the probable load shedding stage is, because it's here to stay for the next half decade plus, and then try and match them as best as possible. Because what that does, apart from providing water to people, it helps keep the system wet. Because as soon as the system goes dry, and that's what happens in Joburg, then they get these exponential rise in leaks, and you're talking hundreds a day. So the answer is one has to operate smartly through fancy measurement and fancy analytics. It's the only way we're going to be able to rescue the ship before we can get to the hardware that needs to be upgraded. And that hardware is going to take us 5 to 10 years. The software can be installed in 3 to 4 months and then rolled out programmatically.
Thanks, Benoit. And Anthony, over to you. Now, when I thought of this question, I thought of the citizen-driven initiatives like the Henops Revival, for example. But what strategies would you recommend for addressing the pollution of our waterways and dysfunctional wastewater treatment plants?
Yeah, okay. There are a couple of questions embedded in that one question. So I think firstly, the role played by entities like Henops Revival, I think, cannot be underestimated in South Africa. There's that type of NGO is finding its way across different parts of the country. In fact, my T-shirt here is one from the Cape. You see that one there, along the Garden Route. So these NGOs are starting to spring up and starting to take root. And I think they're doing a really excellent job. It costs nothing to society. They don't use tax money, so they're very financially efficient. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to remove whatever garbage you can find in the rivers. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of garbage, and that speaks to the culture of South Africa, where we just throw stuff away, throw stuff out of the window of your car, or you just go to a stadium and just leave all your junk there, or go to the park and just leave all your Kentucky Fried Chicken barrels there. That's just what we do as a nation, and frankly, it's that's the root cause of the degradation of our rivers. Of course, is then exacerbated by our dysfunctional sewage works. Ironically, if you look at the sewage work dysfunction, the biggest single polluter in the country is the state. Think about that. The biggest single polluter is the government, because they control 1,000 plus minus wastewater treatment works in some form or other, and they're all spewing this nasty stuff out into the water. Yeah. So we've got to get a handle on those things, and I think the future is going to be more about NGO activity, looking after things like along the rivers, but we're also going to start seeing corporate interests, business companies are going to start coming together now, and they're going to start realizing that things cannot carry on. And I'll give an example now. We've got a very sophisticated real estate development in Durban, north of Durban, place called Mhlanga Ridge. That's kind of the Sandton, if you like, of Durban. All of your big corporates have got high-rise buildings there and what have you, and they've got serious water constraints at the moment now. Now, if you look at the capital value of that couple of square kilometers, I mean, we're talking trillions of rands worth of capital tied up there, and now that's going to be the kind of place where you're going to start seeing enough capital density to start bringing online these public-private partnership type of solutions that are going to start cleaning up the rivers. And I might just add, in closing on this particular question, when I was in Australia, I go to Australia on a fairly regular basis, and the last couple of trips I've done to Australia, I've learned something that's been reinforced each time I go there now, and that is that the transition of your coastal cities to desalination of seawater has got incredible number of benefits, not only economic benefits, and from a river's perspective, a river's health perspective, the ironic benefit of seawater desalination is that you don't have to run your rivers as hard as you did before. You don't have to abstract all the water that's in the river. You can leave water in the river to dilute out the nasty stuff that's there already. So the dilution improves, and you improve the ecological processes within the system. So the irony of it is that our future is going to be the use of high technology to actually create ecological rehabilitation. So we are literally co-evolving with nature. We are co-shaping. Homo sapiens is now becoming a shaper of those ecological processes for as long as nature is going to tolerate us as a nuisance species, as an invasive species. Because the day that nature decides that we are truly invasive species, then nature is going to just shake its back, and like fleas off that back, we're going to get scratched away and knocked into oblivion, because that's what we are. We're nothing more than fleas on the back of nature.
So we know what role the DWS plays, but are there ways in which municipalities can better safeguard our water supply against contamination?
I presume you're asking me. Okay, so our municipalities are broken. I think most of our municipalities are so dysfunctional that under their current configuration, I do not see how they could actually conceivably do that. We have a situation where in certainly every municipality that I'm aware of, all of the budget they have available goes to servicing their staff benefits and their staff, their wage bill. It doesn't go into improving the environment or improving infrastructure, etc., etc. So I don't see our municipalities as playing a meaningful role under its current configuration at the moment now. So I cannot see us getting out of this nosedive unless we have this public-private kind of partnership. And Benoit and myself have spoken a lot about that public-private partnership, where you create these series of special purpose vehicles, and each of those special purpose vehicles actually start institutionalizing the processes that should be happening within the municipality. But the benefit is that they're ring-fenced and that people can't put their hands in there and steal the money, because that's our central problem in South Africa. So as far as I'm concerned, municipalities are pretty dysfunctional. There are a couple that stand out. I was in Georgia a while ago. Georgia's got a fantastically functioning municipality. So they stand out. They are head and shoulders above others. And I dare say there are others in the country as well. So I can't say that they all are dysfunctional. But certainly places like Durban, completely, totally dysfunctional. East London, Port Elizabeth, dysfunctional. Johannesburg, well, teetering on some kind of form of dysfunction. And of course, where I live, Port Shepstone, Ugu, 100% dysfunctional. I've been measuring our water just pressure for the last 12 months, and for more than 80% of the time, the bulk municipal water supply is non-compliant to the SANS fire safety pressure hazard, because SANS 241, the drinking water quality, does not deal with pressure, but the fire one does. And so for more than 80% of the time, the Ugu District Municipality has been non-compliant on pressure delivery. So I just don't see it being able to self-correct. I just don't think it's possible.
Thanks, Anthony. And Benoit, over to you. How effective do you think the National Infrastructure Plan 2050 will be in addressing South Africa's water management challenges?
So I think that's the blueprint to go forward. And what's very critical is it talks to what your previous question too, is we're going to go from 144 to 50 water service authorities. And those water service authorities are going to be source to tap. So in other words, and I've written about this early on in the year, it's the only way to do it is where you have a single utility that's responsible from source to tap. So DWS then is really the custodian, and the regulator is being established within DWS, but will be separated in time. We'll regulate these to make sure that the play is fair. I don't see it being privatized, not with the current regime. You got to remember that these are communists and socialists, so privatization is a no-no, but private sector participation is acceptable. So eThekwini's already gone into that because it admitted a year or whatever, 18 months after the floods, it could not run its water distribution system as sewage works. So half the sewage works, so 10 of the 20 in rough numbers, already contracted out to the water board, sewage works to the water board. Okay, I know it doesn't sound right, but it's from one hot pan to another. It's not that hot, the other one. So what we've got is wall-to-wall water boards, and I don't believe that's intentional. I believe the reality is that 3 water boards, 2 fell over, and the one was going to fall over. By having one water board, you've got one center of management, technology, scientific, accounting, legal excellence, as opposed to 3 that you're supposed to have, you don't have. So that's the idea with the water service authorities. The only way to change that, to go to another model, is to change the constitution And I don't believe that will see the daylight at the moment. There are other more complex issues actually being fed into at the moment. We've got to watch Constitution very, very carefully. The guys are changing the rules. A lot of legislation is being forced through as we speak right now, not only in the water space, in quite a few. So, so what we've got to do is have these centers of excellence. The Development Bank of South Africa is probably the only state-owned entity. It's not the only one that's profitable, because IDC is also, but it's the only one that is highly profitable. And its loan book is 97% or 98% with the metros. So it's not exposed, and the metros have never defaulted. And they've got measures to avoid the default. Remember, it's government on government, so it makes it a little bit easier. But somehow they've managed to keep the ship steering, and now they've got this grant funding to do what we call project preparation. Now, the other thing is, if you don't know what the problem is, how the hell are you going to go to the market and get the private sector to participate like the NIP 2050 or National Infrastructure Plan 2050 talks about? You need to do the project preparation. That's our Achilles heel, apart from candid deployment and that. And so what they've managed to do is secure 4.1 or 4.2 billion rands worth of seed funding. And that funding is just for municipalities, water service authorities, to do the project preparation so that you can go to the market and do what the NIP 2050 says and get the private sector to participate. There's what condition, though. It has to have a 70% impact on the carbon footprint, because it comes from the Green Climate Fund, and that is driven by carbon reduction of carbon footprints. So it's very sophisticated. Average municipality doesn't understand it. They don't have to, because national government is now imposing it through criminal cases. So there's in the Northern Cape, I saw there's 12 criminal cases already, just in the Northern Cape little towns, because not one complies. So there's over 100 criminal cases apparently on the go at the moment, and more unfolding. And that's to force them to acknowledge, A, they have a problem, and B, what's your plan to remediate? And by the way, we have the Water Partnership Office that can address some of your issues. So that is happening. And the Water Partnership Office is not funded by the fiscus. It's the DBSA stands on its own 2 feet. It's a development bank of Southern Africa. Southern government is the shareholder, but the funding is from international markets. So what they're trying to do is emulate the IPP office, which is also under DBSA and the Department of Energy. It's the IWP, Independent Water Producers, and that's going to be able to unlock a lot of things. So, and also it will stop a lot of the pilfering, because the monies will go through the DBSA and not through the municipality. So that's quite important. And then once you go to private sector participation, they go into what the DBSA, it's a conditioned precedent, they go into these special purpose vehicles where it's transparent and where you don't have just government stakeholders, you've got private sector and finance and global watchdogs, IMF and World Bank. So it's a World Bank model that's being used. So these will go a long way to sorting out, but 2 out of 3 municipalities don't know that DBSA or the Water Partnership Office exists. Okay, the metros do, but they don't know they exist. So I believe there's a lot of tools at hand for us to start sorting things out. We're just going to get the sticky politicians' hands out of it. We have to depoliticize the process as much as possible. Through the DBSA, it will be highly depoliticized, but I'm not saying it will be completely depoliticized. The IPP office has been compromised, as we know. So yeah, but it takes 2 to tango. So the local municipality has to be a willing participant, and that's part of the problem. So in Joburg, you can't talk to them. Nobody can talk to them from any sphere of government, because they're fighting amongst themselves. The president tried to intervene, it didn't work. Okay, so it's you got to go through that political bun fight before and see who comes out of it. And until it's something tenable, nothing is really going to happen. So the people in Joburg Water are completely paralyzed, because they cannot do anything without council approving things. So it's not easy, but I think they're going to overcome it. If you don't, you get voted out, because I think that's going to start happening now.
Oh my goodness. We are needing to wrap up very soon, but I want to quickly get back to something we talked about earlier, and that is leaks. So Anthony, I'd like to ask you, what role does regulation play in addressing leakage issues and ensuring accountability? And in your opinion, how can legal and regulatory measures be strengthened to control leaks?
Well, we've got fantastic legislation. We've got fantastic regulatory processes and principles and whatever. They're just not implemented. So, the first step is we have to implement what the law says. I mean, the National Water Act was created to improve water quality in rivers. And since the Act has been created, water quality in rivers has been destroyed. It's been, you can empirically verify that the Act has failed. The Act was created to generate 19 water management areas with catchment management agencies. They failed. They didn't do it. So in other words, we failed to implement what the law and what the regulatory processes entail. So until we start, grasping the bull by the horns and actually implementing what the law says we must, we're going to constantly go backwards, and we're going to constantly reinvent the wheel. We've got to do the right thing at the right time consistently. It's not rocket science. Do the right thing, do it consistently. And of course, above all else, at the very heart of this whole thing is we have to apply the rule of law. If you've got one person that can steal or rob or do whatever it is that they want to do, and simply by virtue of the fact that they're politically connected, all they do is they get redeployed to another position, but they're not held accountable, then of course we're going to continuously fall into that black hole. So accountability is the very, very heart of this whole thing. And accountability, I would argue, is the face of this legal issue that I've mentioned here now, the face of the rule of law. Without rule of law, you can't have accountability. Without accountability, you can't have progress, you can't have development. And I'll give you an example. Right now, we're seeing a catastrophic failure across our economy. We're seeing, for example, where South Africa used to be a producer of iron and steel, a producer of copper cables and copper value-added products, a producer of motor vehicles, a producer of all kinds of things. We're not going to be able to continue that anymore now because we don't produce steel anymore. Our steel production is being closed down for a whole variety of reasons. So very soon, South Africa will not be able to manufacture the steel pipes that we need to upgrade our infrastructure with. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's quite shocking, but it's South Africa used to be the most industrialized country in Africa, and we're now going backwards. We're going back to a pre-colonial form of an economy that is not industrialized. So while I really listen to Benoit with a deep respect, I also listen to this whole thing with and I shrug my shoulders and say, how can you talk about the fifth industrial revolution and a digital future based on artificial intelligence and algorithms calculating thousands of things per second? When people are quite happy to go back to before the ox wagon, when the ox wagon was the means of transport. So we've got to get that mindset right. Otherwise, we're just really not going to make any progress.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'm going to ask both of you just for a quick final word. So Benoit, final word from you, and then Anthony, if we can have a final word from you in closing, please.
So despite the absolute bad show, the collapse of South Africa, that I still have small amount, a lot less than last year, but a small amount of hope. So next year for me is the last year. I'm going to give it a bash.
Thanks, Benoit. And Anthony, your final word today?
Yeah, my final word today is that I think the collapse that we've been talking about is upon us. I think 2024 is going to be a very, very unpredictable year. I think we're going to see a final collapse of the political system and a splintering into a whole bunch of different factions that are difficult to predict. And I think, of course, in the wake of that, we're going to start seeing the accelerated failure of the national economy. So this is something that is, it's terrible. It's upon us. But batten down the hatches. 2024 is going to be a bucking bronco, a rough horse to ride.
With that, I want to say a huge big thank you to everyone in our audience today. Professor Anthony Turton, thank you to you. Benoit Leroy, huge thank you to you for your input. And I want to wish everyone watching a safe holidays, and we're looking forward to a new year. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you for joining us on The Water Hour, the show that dives deep into the critical role of water in shaping our society and economy. Join us next time as we explore the work of the South African Water Chamber, only on The Water Hour.